Good evening, friends, and thank you for joining us tonight here at Pendo Hill. Eh, I would like to start today by making some very personal reference to why hope. Why hope? I didn't grow up as a friend. I grew up in a environment that was very Catholic centered and in a community that was very liberal if you consider uh, how many Catholic communities are for many of us or around many of us, but a community that was uh, heavily organized in small communities and a community where people knew each other and took care of each other. It doesn't matter the struggles that we were facing as individuals, but growing up on this community was a marvelous experience for me. And one of the things that I remember very distinctively was listening to the elders, what we will call in a more quickly way, and you will see that I will be making reference to some of these, and I know that I will try to keep this lecture as open as it can be, to reflect the my own personal journey. But I remember always listening to to other people as they were praying, a phrase that in one of the prayer that caught my attention: esperanza nuestra, our hope, our hope. And that caught my attention because the concept of hope that I grew up with was not an individual hope. It was always a collective hope. The personalized hope was nurtured after that collective hope. And I wanted to start because that experience marked my life in many ways. That way of seeing, as I call it now as an adult, frame what you will be listening from me today, hearing from me today. So, tonight we will be speaking about hope. And I intentionally asked Lena to read that beautiful poem from Emily Dickinson. Uh, when she is she used words that I could not use to describe hope, as she beautifully put it. I really love Emily and her words. You know, her poems are a constant fount for me as I try to live my experiential and spiritual life. So, exploring hope is not an easy task. It wasn't 1 week ago. It wasn't 3 months ago. It wasn't 10 years ago. It wasn't 60 years ago. Exploring hope always require courage, always require intentionality, and always require that we open ourselves to the unknown. When we decide to, well, or when Lena and the team invited me to speak tonight, I I said I think that I have the thing. I think that I will be talking about recreating hope, and this conversation came to be because within our own team, I think that we were exploring some differences about the perception and the experience that we have had in regards to hope. So I know that there is no an easy task here, especially if we allow ourselves to be provoked by the subtle and deep meaning that hope represents in many ways. Tonight, I want to invite you to a journey, to an exploration of hope eh, beyond the familiar concept that we have of that little word. I want us to walk away from that concept and expand the vision that we can have about hope, but no vision here in the head. And you can see that my head doesn't have many hairs, but from here, from the heart, from our hands, from our foot, I want to invite you to this journey and to look at hope with a completely new lens. I want to look at hope through some of the main aspects that I have experienced in living it as a child, as an adult, and as somebody that is sharing my life journey with so many of you already. And yes, I will intentionally be sharing with you this as a provocation, a personal and social provocation. Again, I cannot betray my old community. I learned hope as a collective process. So I can never speak just about my personal hope without making reference to the common hope that we collectively are looking, working toward, and building little by little. Also, I don't want to give you the impression that this is coming from somebody that has reached a state of perfection, because you know that I am not perfect. All the contrary, I want you to accept these remarks tonight as coming from somebody that is in a constant dance to recreate hope in his life, to recreate hope as I go, to recreate hope as we collectively also envision what can be possible to have a better world. I recognize that the word hope in English has some limitations, and we need to work with that limitation. Yeah. And I started saying this because hope in English is a concept that appears in the 13th century. Is when the word hope uh, made it into the English language. Especially, it's a new word when you compare it with, for example, the word esperanza in Spanish that came from the Latin esperare, espes, or with the word tikva from the Hebrew, that is the same meaning, hope, uh, but that has, a couple thousand years going around. However, we need to work, as I said, with the tools that we have in order to create and find meanings, in order to revitalize not just the conceptual framework, but to look at every practical aspect and the dynamic force within hope, the force that can transform our lives as we open ourselves to it. So let me start by inviting you to do a quick exercise. And Lina, I will place our friends in a small group here now. I want you to spend 3 minutes, 3 minutes, just sharing what is the concept that you are holding of hope. So let me start by defining what hope means for me, uh, and the way how I will I have been living hope based on my initial experience that I have as a child, and that I carry with me as an adult. For me, the way we we will be on the same page when talking about recreating hope require looking at it with through the different components that hope may carry within it. If you ask me for a quick definition of hope, I will say that hope is an act of looking and moving forward while revolutionizing and transforming the present. A way of looking and moving forward while revolutionizing and transforming the present. This is a concept that I articulate based on my own life journey, but a life journey that has been nurtured by so many friends, my neighbors, uh, my teachers, my students, my friends, and as well as the experience of many people, many authors and people that I have had the opportunity to meet in my life that are also very well known. Uh, just to name a few people that I have stopped to look what are the thoughts that they have on this concept that I am experiencing as hope. Uh, there is a reformist theologian, German reformist theologian, Moltmann, that has developed a whole series of reflection on hope. The Indian activists and sociologists and environmentalists, Vandana Shiva also, is somebody that I look at a person as a person that not only talk about hope, but that live hope in a way that people can easily refer and translate into their own personal experience. I mentioned these two in this way, but Paulo Freire is one that is very close to my heart. And Berta Cáceres from Honduras, you may remember her name because she was murdered after taking care of a piece of land that she was protecting from environmental destruction. And the government, together with people with a private interest, it went over and took her life because she represented a barrier to their goal. And of course, I need to mention here Martin Luther King Jr. As as you know, he developed his entire life to be a testament of hope, as he beautifully said later in his writing. All of them, I believe, have in common the exemplary living affirmation that it is within our daily life, it is within our mundane reality that we are able to encounter, cultivate, and nurture hope as a conscious practice. And pay attention to the two last words that I have said: a conscious practice, a conscious praxis, to put it in another term. It's not, this is what I say, that hope not necessarily live here in our head, but it's in our heart, it's in our hands, it's in our feet, it's in our entire body. Because if hope is a praxis, it has to be incarnated in many ways in everything that we do. And this is the first characteristic that I want to share with you today about hope. Hope is a process of incarnation. Many of you may be thinking, here is Francisco coming with this Christian view of incarnation. Well, let's abandon that view and let's think about hope on its own, hope on itself as a process that has to be incarnated in order to be realized, in order to be fully accomplished. It's a process of incarnation in which we are constantly called to action. There is the first characteristic I want to highlight tonight. This is the first characteristic that I want to highlight tonight because I don't want you to be thinking that we will be discussing hope here as an intellectual exercise. Yes, this is an intellectual exercise because it will give us some room for thought, some room for us to recreate our framework around this marvelous word that is hope, this marvelous concept that is hope. But I want to be very clear that hope without that constant call for incarnation, that constant call for action is a myth, and it's a myth with with no value. Yeah, at least for me. I am speaking from myself, as I said at the beginning. So I want to repeat that again. But the action that is embedded in hope is an action that is based in a more deep and fundamental energy, an energy that is implicated not just in hope, but in many other movements. The energy that we easily can identify as love. Hope as an act of love, acting in love, acting with love, acting from love, constitutes a very dynamic experience. When I am asked about describing this, I usually, again, go to my childhood and go to my training as a theologian because I need to make the connection with hope and that word from Hebrew that I mentioned before, tikva, because in Hebrew, that word means trusting in a energy that is larger than us. And this is the meaning of hope in the overall sense. Hope as trust, hope as confidence. These two essential and powerful ingredients for the recreation of hope, especially in times when everything seems to be falling apart. I said at the beginning that it is a challenge to be talking about hope, to be thinking about recreating hope when, for example, around 9.2 million Americans just the year that ended were projected to live in poverty by the end of the year. And for us to have a better perspective on this, it is hard for me to talk about hope when I know that from that number, that 9.2% of the Americans that are living in poverty today, when I apply a ethnic lens to that, or what many of you will call a racial lens to that, 6.6% are white people. 15.2% are black people living, percent of Americans living in poverty today. And 13.8% are Hispanic people, brown people like me, that are living in poverty as the year closes. It is hard to approach hope when we know that tomorrow in the state of Georgia, there will be American citizens that will be staying in line for more than 10 hours in order to exercise a right that they are entitled to. And again, I can give more example about that. It is hard for me to talk to hope or to envision hope or to recreate hope. It is a challenge to recreate hope when we know that we have a health system that is broken and that it hasn't been serving us as it should be. It is hard to think about hope when we know that food security is not a reality for many people, not just in this country, but around the globe. And to finish my short list of these, it is hard to speak about hope when we know that climate disruption is being denied. And every single day, we worsen the situation around protecting our planet. The list of injustice, inequality, and inequity, the list of samples that I can give you, it can overwhelm us tonight. I will continue sharing facts that you can easily research on internet, that you easily can Google and easily can find in the newspaper for yourself as a group. But I want to make sure that this conversation is grounded in reality. Because as I said, reality demands action. And if hope is a call for us to incarnate in our own reality, I need to be aware of what is going on around me. I need to be aware of what is affecting my community. I need to be aware and to be open to change the reality that must to be changed within our lives in order to really exercise hope as an act of incarnation. Now, allow me to share my view on hope as a way to reshape our present. This sharing may be a transgression to today's normalcy. And when I say transgression, I mean it. I mean it. But I do believe that it is necessary for us to, to start there. It is necessary for us to see that the characteristic of hope in details always will ask of us to walk the extra mile, to be able to challenge our boundaries, to challenge our framework, to challenge ourselves. And when I say ourselves, as individual and as collective, in order for us to build something better for everyone. When people ask me sometimes, what is the best way that you can describe this hope that you are talking about? Because you are using some fancy words or you are using some fancy concept here. Praxis. What is praxis? What is incarnation? We want you to give us a example of that may be familiar to us. And when I am presented with that challenge, I again, with my as somebody that has been trained in some theological field, I go to the root. I said, well, let me work with you with something that you are very familiar with. Let's take a look at a small passage in one of the gospel. Let's take this passage and read or listen to it in a way that as if we are founding it for the first time. Let's abandon, that very bad exercise that we sometimes do when we are listening to something that we have read several times, that we, before we advance to the next sentence, we already are finishing it. You know, it's just like, let's abandon that routine, and let's listen to this passage that Luke has for us, and that all of you know as the passage of the Good Samaritan. It's in Luke 10, 25, 37. And I will ask Franks and Jerome, that is within us today, to open her mic, if she is able, and read this passage for us. And whenever you are ready, if you can.
Absolutely, Francisco, glad to. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," he asked, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he replied. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your energy and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." Jesus said to him, "You have given the correct answer. Do this, and you will have life." But with a view of justifying himself, he said to Jesus, "But who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went off, leaving him half dead. Now, by coincidence, a priest was going down the same road, and when he caught sight of him, he went out of his way to avoid him. In the same way, when a Levite came to the place, he took one look at him and crossed the road to avoid him. But this Samaritan who was traveling that way came to where he was and was moved to pity at the sight of him. He went up to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring olive oil and wine on them. He hoisted him onto his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper and said, "Look after him, and on my way back I will reimburse you for any extra expense you have had." Which of these 3, in your opinion, acted like a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The expert in the law replied, "The one who showed him compassion." Jesus said to him, "Then go and do the same yourself."
Thank you. I don't know if you are very familiar with this passage or not. I don't know how many of you have read this. I am not pretending here to convert anybody, just to clarify that. But because this is a very familiar passage within our culture, I use this to say, when I am saying that hope is an act of incarnation, transgression, this is it. And people said, "But why?" And I said, "Well, let's take a look at this in a more detailed way." And I won't start doing exegesis with you tonight, yeah. But I wanted to highlight 2 things. This man act move of compassion, out of compassion, because he seeing the other somebody that has equal dignity, because he see in the other person that has been robbed somebody that I must not be indifferent with. Yeah. Hope, recreating hope, has to depart from that space of feeling, being moved by compassion. The other aspect of this is like and this is the connection with hope here, is that this man has the conviction that this other man will be better. He has such a strong conviction that he invests himself, he invests his resources. In fact, he reached out to his connection and said, take care of this guy, that when I, and whatever you spend on it, I will pay you back when I am returning. That man has the faith that this situation can be much better and that I cannot be indifferent. I must act from a place of care and compassion and be against everything that is against life. And when I said everything, I mean it. Yeah. Uh, the Gospel of Luke is giving us a tool here to play in so many good and different ways. Look at the three persons that passed, the person that took care of the man that was, let's use the word, sick around the road, along the road. It is somebody that came from a completely different place. Somebody that today we will call a alien. Yeah. Somebody that today we will call a migrant, or maybe somebody that is looking for, for a better situation in a different place in order to run uh, from the violence that is experiencing in its own situation. So that transgression right there is a cultural one, is a religious one too, and at the same time is is compromising compromising his entire relationship with this business that he is in relationship with. Uh, if this was a person that was, let's use our imagination here. If this was a person that was traveling because of a regular business, maybe he knew the hotel that he was in, and I'm bringing somebody from a different religion, from a different culture that is being beat, has been beat in on the street, to somebody to take care of it. That may put you in a you know red list within the state at that moment. Just trying to use my imagination here. The point I want to highlight with this is that acting on hope, acting from hope, as this Samaritan did, is a way of saying, look, my action has to be a testament of the faith, a testament of the things that I am looking for. In this regard, this is a movement that put life in the first place by looking at the other again with the same dignity that we have ourselves. By looking at the other without stopping at the cultural, religious, political, ethnic, or whatever difference that may exist. This is why I say that acting in hope constitute an act of transgression, because we have to overcome our boundaries, to walk away from so many of our social, political, and religious frames in order to find the realization of hope within ourselves and in the life of people that have fallen into the hands of robbers. And believe me, there are many robbers among us today, robbers that we can identify with other terms, I can name a few for you if you wanted to follow up along the line. One of the robbers that we have among ourselves today is systemic racism, corruption, environmental pollution, the constant violence that we are living in. You know, as I was looking at the newspaper over Christmas and New Year's Eve, I I cannot believe that that we have accepted so much violence into our life as if things doesn't matter anymore. And I know that we are concerned, and I know that we want to make the difference on that. But the acting in hope require of us to be engaged in making that change possible. For people of faith, understanding hope as a process of incarnation as means that we need to approach our social concerns as the dynamics that live in time and space where the divine works within us, in our community, in the world. It's not something that is in a vacuum. It is something that is embedded into our daily life. Other great dimension of hope in which we can constantly learn and expand our experience is by looking at it as a reaffirmation of our convictions. The strong convictions that are behind building a better society, working toward peace and justice, making the effort to restore the damage that we have made to nature. This is something expressed sometimes as faith in action, or as one another way to put this is by Peter early beautifully said in early Christianity, for the people that are very familiar with the Christian letters, being able to give reason for the hope that we hold. Yeah, I will finish Peter's phrase. Being able to give reasons for the hope that we hold is being able to demonstrate with our actions that hope is possible as we transform our day to day as we go. Reaffirming our convictions is a process in which we recognize hope as following an implicated order, in which everything that we do carry in it the seed of goodness, a goodness that materialized, as we saw in the parable, in compassion, a, a sense of making good that is concretized in nonviolence action, and in every piece of justice that we conquer. Just for a grammar check here, please notice that all that I have said so far describe hope as a verb, not as a noun. This is an important distinction if we want to remain alert about the call for action that hope brings within it. I don't want to mislead you. I also recognize that for me, hope also involves a strong sense of mysticism, as it has to be embraced with a active silence. Most of us are living in a environment full of noises where silence is hardly tolerated or welcome. This happens sometimes because we are so afraid of revealing ourselves, or, or maybe so afraid of revealing the most of ourselves. And this happened in a setting where noise can take many forms, many forms. Just to name two very familiar, consumerism is one of the big noise that is within our environment that try to fill the room for not allowing us to experience with this active silence that I am talking about. Or another way is, we are so bombarded with a statistic about people that sometimes when we see in the news, in books, in the newspapers, numbers about how many people has been affected by systemic violence, either here in this country or around the globe. We just look at the numbers. The situation that we have been living with COVID is a great one. I think that right now we are afraid of the pandemic, and we are overwhelmed by how this has hit us, because we don't know how to deal with it. That sometimes we just look at the numbers. Oh, 330,000 people has passed because of this, or 10 million, 13 million American has contracted COVID as we speak. I want us to, yes, listen to the numbers, but think that each of these numbers represent a face, represent a worker, represent a child, represent a mother, represent a grandfather, a grandmother. Let's put the humanity behind the numbers, yeah, in order for us to understand that. Hope as active silence, it doesn't mean that I need to be quiet. What it means is that we have to open ourselves to a reality that we don't completely fully know. And this is why I use the word implicated there. And I use the word combined with order. This I am borrowing it from physics. Yeah, implicated order. Implicated order in quantum physics means that everything can be carrying the whole in some way or another. And when I said that hope, through this active silence, can be an implicated one, what I am meaning is that we can open ourselves in ways that allow this hope to start its own recreation as we educate ourselves, as we open our heart to others and to ourselves, as we open our eyes and look at reality with a completely pairs of lens. Hope as active silence means that as we look forward to transformation, we identify and welcome the many possibilities as part of our spiritual journey and as we live our many struggles. In this active silence, we make ourselves vulnerable. We see ourselves in relationship with each other, in mutual companionship. Hope as active silence is to remember. And again, let me borrow a word from my mother tongue, Spanish. Because remember for me, it doesn't necessarily translate what I want to say here, but recordar does. Yeah, recordar in Spanish is remember, but recordar came from a Latin word that is a complex word, recordis. And recordis means passing it again through the heart, passing it again through the heart. So this active silence allow me to take whatever I am facing, yeah, to sit with it and to pass it through the heart as a way to find what are the things that need to be transformed, what are the possibilities that we can have at hand for us to be in a much better place. It is in and with the heart that we can contemplate and search our reality in order to discover our alternatives, our many opportunities for recreation. Hope is a manifestation of our indignation. We encounter so many situations that generate anger, sadness, guilt, inconformity, and the list can be very long. And if I continue, we won't finish tonight. But we need to constantly stop and ask ourselves about what is going on. When indignation appears as a direct response to the lack of justice, when our anger is expressed without replicating the violence around us and within us, or when our sadness creates space for solidarity, we can say that we are experiencing hope as a manifestation of indignation. An indignation that recognizes that something needs to change for us to have a better and authentic life. As this happens, hope becomes a prophetic act because it denounces what is wrong, personal and socially, and it announces other ways for making the world a better place. When I sometimes place with this description of hope, people has react and said, "Well, Francisco, you are a dreamer. You are a dreamer, and I don't know how this necessarily will help us to move forward in the struggle that we are facing today." And I said, "Well, let's do this. Allow me to look and to face the struggle with the hope and the experience of hope that I am describing to you. And you will see that the road that we will be sharing will be much enjoyable, more in tune with the final outcome that we want to reach. And I don't want to diminish hope as necessarily product of outcome. I want to think of hope as the process that we live in. Finally, I want to say that as we renew ourselves, hope is a life journey. Hope is a life journey that has to be exercised both personally and socially. Personally, it is an interdependence platform for us to find wholeness, compassion, and love. Socially, hope represents and contributes to the common dream of a society rooted in truth, justice, and care. Care that we can find not just within ourselves, but care that we can construct together for serving our nation, for serving people around the world. A care that demonstrate really that we are fully invested in constructing a world that is possible. I will stop here because I know that we have, usually half an hour for Q&A, and I know that right now we will have like around 25 minutes. And see what do you think about this. And again, this is my intention here is to have a provocation, and that we together can find meaning as we try to recreate hope in the current moment in history. And I am here paraphrasing Dr. King, and when he was talking about the church, like I said, he said, well, the church has to recognize that hope has to be speaking to the current hour. Yeah, it's that thing. So Lina, here we are, welcoming questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Francisco. I welcome folks to put questions into the chat, and then I can read those out loud. I just want to check, Francisco, do you want also for folks to unmute themselves and ask you directly? How would you like me to moderate the questions?
I will say that as we do, that you post the question. I already see a couple of questions here that I can start in case that motivated others to write the question and you collect them.
Okay,
So
great.
Let me start by try to address the two questions that Tara put in the chat. When I said active silence, some people, if you just use the word silence, some people will walk away with a sense that silence is a lack of action. And the type of silence that I am referring to, the best experience to this will be the ones that many faith practice or spiritual practice has, like friends or a very contemplative movement has. It's not silence because silence. It is silence because we want to be expectant for something greater than ourselves. We want to create a container where we can fully put ourselves in a energy flow that can give us meaning. And when I said active silence, I am saying, I put the word active there just to highlight that this is not a way of being quiet right there in the corner and I'm saying nothing, I am not making any noise. No. Your silence in this way, active silence, can be a powerful tool, not just for renovation, for self-renewal, but also to highlight and make visible what many situations within our life today can be, or want to be not necessarily visible. And I mentioned a few of them at the beginning. Structural racism is one of them. The economic gap that we live in our society, that is another one of them. How my active silence can allow me to have a better comprehension and prepare me for a better approach for me to encounter those situations. The other question that you have was, it about the reference that I did to the word recordar, remember in Spanish, recordis, pass it again through the heart. It, I don't know if you had that experience, but in many occasions, for me to really comprehend and for really understand what is the contribution that I can make to any effort, I need to think about that over and over. Not just because I want to really make sure that what I will be doing is the right move, but because I want not just to welcome my own consideration into this. I want to welcome my community into this. I want to welcome, I want to really be able to read what is going on around me. Because if hope is an implicated one, I need to consider that my action is not isolated. If my action is isolated, that means that I may not be serving the hope that I am looking for. So the passing it again through the heart is I will invest myself fully into this process over and over in order to really exercise my hope as something that can take concrete action.
Francisco, there's a couple questions that relate to doubt and uncertainty. So there's a question from Tina as well as from Ruth. Can you comment on uncertainty and hope? And what can one do when one observes hope dying in one's heart?
Great questions. Yeah. Uncertainty, we have framed ourselves in a setting that want to take for granted everything. Yeah, we want to have control of everything, and not only that, we want to have control over others too. Yeah, I don't have to go in history here or in sociology or economic terms here, but our desire to control allow ourselves to approach uncertainties as if they are necessarily bad things. Yeah, certainty has to come from the things that I am familiar with, the things that we collectively through history has getting to know, over practice and practice. And uncertainty and hope, definitely there is a dance right there. When I say that we have that hope is a way of opening ourselves, I want to expand to say that opening ourselves is also opening ourselves to uncertainties. Yeah. Opening ourselves to the unknown. Because if we are just opening ourselves to everything that we know, well, I don't know if the transformation that we are aiming for will be real. I don't know how much transformation we can have. Yeah. I don't remember the quote now, but I believe that we have to to examine our hope, and we have to act as if we already have gained what we are hoping for. Yeah, this is the incarnation piece. And as we enter into that process, of course, we have to be open to the uncertainties that that process can bring with it. When a good example of this is like, you know, when you decide to go to college, you have in mind that you will get a degree 4 or 5 years after, yeah. But the whole process that you are going through, or that you will go through, is full of stuff that you don't necessarily know, yeah. And for me, in this example, that is a very simple one, that unknown pieces are the uncertainties. The hope is the process that you are entering with confidence that that will improve your life as we go through. Yeah, it's not just the hope is not getting a cartoon at the end of the term. Yeah, it's not a certificate at the end of your 5-year training. The hope is that you will have a process full of experience that will make you a better person, capable of approaching and serving society in better terms. And the question about dying, this is a more complex one. I will be very transparent with you, because that also means that we will need to revisit our own view on dying. If we won't have much time here tonight to go into this, but you know, if you look at living and dying as two completely and antagonistic experience, well, there is not much room for us to explore this. But if you look at living and dying as a process that is a dance that is going as we, you know, we die as we live. We die as we live. And of course, there is so much that we don't know. There are so many uncertainties on this process that we are not eager to touch, that make us uncomfortable. And believe me, in many cultures, dying is not necessarily a bad thing when it happens in the normal cycle. Yeah, is just being perceived as a passage from a place to another after serving and having a good life. You know, this is the experience of many tribes in Latin America. Specifically, I am thinking of people in some region of Bolivia where they the celebration of they call it like that, the celebration of somebody that has passed is usually represented with seeds, because they look at living and dying as seeds that are planted for life to continue as we honor you know, our experience in this planet.
There's a question about joy, and sort of an observation that a lot of the faces during your talk were very serious. Do you believe that there is a joyful aspect to hope where recreation could better be thought of as fun?
One of the elements that I forget to include in my remarks tonight was looking at hope as a ludic experience. Yeah, definitely, I believe so. I do believe that hope is a process on its own that is ludic, And when I say that, it's playful and definitely bring joy, bring happiness. It can bring happiness. I believe that if I don't believe that this is part of the recreation piece of hope, I wouldn't be talking to you tonight. You know, I definitely I definitely believe with a lot of optimism that hope is one of those tools that we have, this walking tool that we have to accompany us as we walk our path. Yeah. It, and can we are in a privileged position here because we can definitely determine in many ways how we will approach it or how we will use it. Yeah. I have had conversation with people that have nothing if we compare with the way how we live, with the resources that we have, with the access to stuff that we have. People that, you know, and and those people has been the ones that has taught me the best way of experiencing hope. I can name some people. I can name Don Nicolas in a poor neighborhood in Santo Domingo. Uh, this guy, he was, when I met Don Nicolas, he was already on his maybe 50, late 50 or 60. He was taking care of his mother and taking care of his son. Live very, very a simple life. And the smile of Don Nicolas and the commitment that he has to his community, the commitment that he has to the process of improving the livelihood of his neighborhood was something that I couldn't see in anybody else. And that guy was, that smile was never lost. He was able to share his hope in ways that everybody in the room felt lighted by his happiness. And you ask me how that happened. What he Don Nicolas was somebody that he never went to high school, for example. He was a worker and he was 7 year old. And it was impressive to me, like looking how those people were eh, embracing hope in ways that were contagious. Yeah. In ways that you cannot pass by them and be the same after, because it was just right there. It's just like a burning experience. So I definitely think that there is joy and there is happiness in joy, in hope. I think that without envisioning that happening, that happiness and joy, eh, we may fell short about the process of recreating hope as we envision it.
Um, Robert would like you to maybe say a little bit more about what you're driving at when you talk about the fact that the word hope in English is sort of more modern or younger than esperanza or the Hebrew word for hope. Um, and there's a couple of questions asked within that. Are the Spanish and Hebrew, do you see them as more inclusive, more collective? Yeah, if you could say some more about that, please.
Well, more than more collective is because the word in English came very late. You know, it was in the 13th century, and it comes from the German, and in the German language there were this very concept of hope that is associated with the Pauline letters, yeah, as a theological concept, as a theological virtue. It is interesting for me because the word in Latin that Paul was, you know, also a little bit familiar with, and the word in Hebrew that Paul also were very familiar with, it, the piece that there are difference is that the word in English is more associated to a final outcome that I am aiming at. It's more associated with desire, to reaching for, yeah. The words in esperanza and tikva in Hebrew, tikva in Hebrew is go beyond that desire. It go beyond that wishing for. It is yes. We are wishing for. We are aiming for. But we know that we are doing this in a way that we are trusting already that this will happen because the energy behind it is greater than us. Yeah. So the English word didn't carry the trusting piece that the other two words carry with them. Yeah. The same thing with esperanza. Espes is the origin in Latin. Espes. So the distinction is not necessarily if it is a more collective concept or not. The distinction is that it fell short in the sense that the word in English put everything as if we are in fully control of what we are hoping for. And while the Latin and the Hebrew one look at that aspect, but don't limit it at it. It open, you know, the background to a bigger experience.
Thank you, Francisco. Do you want one more question, or how are you feeling about how you want to close?
If there is one more question that you have already.
Oh, there are more than one. I would be choosing one. I have many here. Would you like me to choose one?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Can you speak to collective hope when not everyone in the collective is hopeful?
I love that question. Hope is dynamic. Hope is dynamic. And yes, I can see collective hope without having the collective fully involved. Yes. Because remember, collective hope is looking at a greater good. Yeah. To put this in a very familiar example for today, in the society that we live today. So we have been talking a lot about how can we envision a society where without racism. This is a collective hope. Let's put it that way. Do we have everybody involved for this collective hope? No, we know that no. We know that there are people that we will struggle very hard to abandon, what they have been accustomed and their whole life. Yeah. So that means that the collective hope doesn't have value, meaning, that cannot happen, that, no. And again, I go to my definition of hope. We look and move forward to revolutionizing and transforming the present. Yeah. So hope is a process, as a personal and collective, where it doesn't stop in one goal that we have out there 20 years from now. No. It is exercised in a day to day as we walk our path. So in that regard, I hope that the collective also can be expanded, and that the people that are, not necessarily fully involved will, little by little, joining the collective hope as they see that its realization is possible, and that its realization is also better for everybody. Yeah. So that would be my answer to that question, my short answer to that question.
Well, thank you so much, Francisco. We're at time. I know I've gotten just so much out of this, and appreciate people's questions and participation. Thank you all for joining us in this exploration. I don't know if you want to offer any closing thoughts.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for being part of this experience. As I said at the beginning, I was offering these words as part of my own personal journey, a journey that I believe you also are part of it, and many of you more closely than others, but it is in this process of facing and living our life that we can make possible what we are aiming for. I do believe that a better world is possible, and I do believe that for that to happen, we have to be fully invested, fully involved, putting our faith into action. If you don't consider yourself a religious person, putting yourself, your spiritual being into action in a way that is more holistic, in a way that is more transparent, and that in a way that definitely welcome others with dignity and solidarity, as we try to create a better world for everyone. And I think it's possible. So this is my hope, and this is the hope that I want to give and to live with you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, friends.